Welcome back. Kulisa Social Solutions Dr. Leslie Ann van Salem has welcomed the launch of the National Dialogue. However, she is urging government to ensure that civil society is properly represented. A task team has been appointed to lead preparations for South Africa's upcoming dialogue scheduled for the 15th of August of this year. President Cyril Ramaphosa confirmed the date earlier this week, noting that the dialogue will include a series of public engagement and sessions aimed at addressing key national issues.
When I think of the money that's been spent and the money that's previously been invested in gathering grassroots solutions, the way we've engaged with communities who've come up with such amazing solutions to our challenges in our country, which we don't seem to consider, but everything's from the top down. And I'm just worried that the selection of panelists might not include the community organizers, the youth leaders, the GB survivors, and the informal workers. They are the ones who come up with the true knowledge about what needs to be implemented and discussed and percolated into the way forward.
The Preparatory Committee Task Team on the proposed National Dialogue says no final budget has been confirmed. The committee says this is because there isn't a concrete plan for the 9-month program as yet. This comes after the Presidency estimated the cost of the dialogue to be 700 million rand. Take a listen to Mduduzi Mbada from the Office of the Presidency.
What we could say firstly is that democracy is not cheap. Building a nation is very costly, and that's why the next thing we're going to do, emerging from this work, we're going to go to the Inter-Ministerial Committee where we present the draft budget, and then we workshop that budget. And just to give you a sense, I mean, just to pull the provinces, the municipalities, you're looking probably estimation of more than 700 million. So that's quite a lot of money.
Now, for more on this, I'm joined by Professor Alex Fer, Heever, a governance specialist at Wits University. Very good evening. Always good to have you, Prof. Mixed reaction, but overwhelmingly a negative reaction to this announcement, particularly following the Presidency mentioning that it could cost around 700 million rand. What do you make of all of this, Prof? Is this another talk shop, an expensive one at that?
Yeah, I think that is the concern that people have. I mean, we have had a lot of talk shops. We've had some engagements. Nothing productive seems to come of them. And a lot of key systemic issues are never addressed. And very often they're not addressed because they're politically too close to home. For instance, the current, for the ANC, for instance, is in a very strong position to maintain the status quo. So we haven't seen electoral reform. We haven't seen anything to systemically address the capabilities of the state and address the causes of corruption, despite the Zondo Commission report, and nobody's gone to jail and nobody's been properly pursued. And many of the people involved in that are sitting in parliament or sitting as ministers. We've seen situations where the way in which the political compromise has been reached when we have a cooperative government set up within government is really just to add ministries rather than to narrow the ministries and to really make our cabinet efficient and effective. We've seen very weak people appointed. So we've got a whole bunch of things that just are never addressed, and people repeatedly discuss these issues. We're seeing the major metros in many areas degrading, not for technical reasons, but for governance reasons. So again, I don't know what the dialogue is meant to be focused on, if not these issues, which we are very much aware of, but the current machinery of government is not addressing them. And it really goes right to the top structures of government as to why they're not being addressed. So is that what the national dialogue is meant to be about? And that's quite aside from the problem that the dialogue might take over a year to happen, and then something will be handed over to somebody, and then there will be another election, and then there will be another government. So what's the point?
One may also wonder, Prof, who exactly is advising the presidency as well when you look at the reaction to this. There's been a lot of concern regarding how much it could possibly cost, even though they have now released a statement saying that, and this is the task team saying that there is no confirmed figure yet, but we also do know that if the presidency mentioned a figure of around 700 million rand, it certainly will go into the millions. So, but Prof, it's not only the matter of the cost that would be involved, but just the ability to go and re-diagnose a problem that has been diagnosed so extensively. So at this point, it's about getting on with the matter of the day and getting your boots on the ground and your hands dirty. What is the point of talking? What are there other ways to advise the presidency apart from the backlash or those that are close to him to say that this may not be the best idea?
Yeah, I don't think that this is the best idea, because we do have structures to deal with many of the major issues in South Africa, and the only issues why are those processes being blocked in many cases. So if we had to look at the purpose of a dialogue, so people might see value for money if there was a very clear focus of the national dialogue, a very specific issue. And now in all policy problems, you have two aspects to them. You have the diagnostic, what the underlying causes, and then the policy responses. And these involve a combination of technical analysis as well as stakeholder engagements to develop a consensus. But it's very unclear what this dialogue would be about. Is it about a diagnostic, another diagnostic, or is it about policy solutions? And how would a grouping like this actually deal with the technicalities of very specific policy solutions? And if I put one thing on the table, we see that the judiciary is not functioning efficiently because the Public Works Department and the Department of Justice seem incapable of maintaining the courts. And the court systems are backward in terms of their administration. A very straightforward issue, and yet it's hugely important as part of our separation of powers. What's wrong there? And does it require a national dialogue to fix it, or does it require somebody competent in the Department and Ministry of Justice to sort out? You know, we've got all sorts of issues to discuss about what powers should be distributed to provinces versus national government in relation to the police services, so that we also have people able to solve local problems, which they're unable to do. So you have systemic gang warfare in the Western Cape, but that government has absolutely no power to deal with it. We've clearly got a problematic model around how we run our railways. All of these things we already have discussions on, but there seems to be a logjam in making any headway on them. So the question really is, what's the point? Because if you had to examine why those policies don't go forward, who's the obstacle? Who's not getting out of the way? And is a national dialogue going to solve that problem? It's unclear that that's what would happen. So, and it's also unclear from who's selected as part of this grouping whether they can deal with these issues.
You know, once bitten, twice shy. As South Africans, we have been down this road where there have been commissions of sorts, and then following that, an inquiry into that commission about corruption that took place. That is another fear that South Africans face when it comes to this national dialogue as well. Prof, talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I've even been on some of those committees of inquiry and commissions as well. And the great frustration is that nothing happens after those commissions. The pace of change is very, very slow. So many systemic issues have been examined. So we've even had we take something like the fire that happened in the city of Johannesburg with 75 people being killed. There's a commission of inquiry into that. It basically makes recommendations, it identifies problems. Not one of those recommendations are taken forward. So this is the problem. Is it a problem that we don't know what the cause of a problem is, or we don't know what the policy solution is, or we do know what the policy solution is, but there's an obstruction to how it's implemented? And I'll raise one absolutely critical issue over which there's been substantial debate, which is electoral reform. The whole issue of actually sewing up our social contract so that there is a contact between society and the government and how it operates requires electoral reform to deepen our democracy. Does that require a national dialogue? Because we had 5 years in which a Minister of Home Affairs basically obstructed the process. So we didn't actually repair our democracy by deepening our electoral system. We had recommendations many years ago, and after Nelson Mandela, on what to do about electoral reform. And clearly there is there is a problem with somebody seeing the deepening of democracy proceeding. So why? And it would be incredibly important because it impacts on how Parliament functions and how the executive is held to account. Those are things that are very important and go to the heart of how our system operates. And it's entirely designed to be, you have a national dialogue in setting up your initial social contract, your initial agreement on a constitution, etc. Thereafter, you rely on the systems that you've put in place to make that structure work. What's happened is that the nuanced building of that has not been taken forward and has in fact been held back. Now, just the discussion on electoral reform doesn't require this national dialogue. It requires the dialogue on the Electoral Act itself.
And just quickly before I let you go, as I'll be regarding the cost of everything, there's also from the statement that was released following that figure of 700 million rand that was thrown out there, there's been a statement for clarity, and it mentions again a solidarity fund for something like this, and basically saying that it will consist of other support, of financial support from whether it be community members, whether it be volunteers, whether it be donations from the private sector as well. So kind of giving an impression that it's not all going to be coming from taxpayers and the government. But be that as it may, would you, Prof, say that even a rand spent on this exercise is still a rand too much?
I think that the question is whether the objective is actually to solve problems in South Africa or to obfuscate. Even if there was a solidarity fund that was created, obviously a few large donors would come forward, and then what is their influence in the process? And again, it contaminates the nature of the program. So really the question is, what does somebody want out of this process? And if people saw value, that it had a number of very specific targets of focus and that they were coherent, you might consider a form of national dialogue. But the question is, it's an open-ended question. They've just said we're going to have a national dialogue as if we need another general open-ended talk shop. We could ask why NEDLAC is not serving its purpose. And there have been recommendation on NEDLAC, which excludes huge parts of society. So our ongoing national dialogue doesn't work because the way we've set it up excludes so many people in society that it's actually become dysfunctional and useless for any social dialogue or a social consensus. A few processes like that are ongoing would be very valuable, but people use NEDLAC just to block stuff. So and to create basically the impression of a consensus, but the process keeps people out. It's an exclusive process. So that's our process of ongoing national dialogue, which is what we require. Parliament is a structure that is part of an ongoing national dialogue. Our legal processes and everything that happens within government are part of an ongoing, recurrent national dialogue. And those structures can work. And as I said, one of the pivotal aspects of making them work is the Electoral Act is one part, and our ability as society to hold people in government to account structurally makes a big difference. If we can't do that, almost nothing works. So the question becomes, yes, I think one would be prepared to spend money on a national dialogue that actually had a clear purpose to it, but it's unclear what purpose that would be as a substitute to all the structures of national consultation that we have at the moment. Are our ministers incapable of having dialogues in their own portfolios? Is that the reason why we need a national dialogue, to bypass very, very weak ministers? Is that the purpose?
Prof, always a pleasure getting your insights. Appreciate your time.